Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Excellencies, distinguished guests, welcome to today's webinar on unlocking value, opportunities, and challenges in Africa's critical energy transition minerals sector. This webinar is organized by UNCTAD's Regional Office for Africa and the Division on International Trade and Commodities. I am Rashid Amwi. I'm an Economic Affairs Officer at the Commodities Branch, Division on International Trade and Commodities, and I will be moderating today's discussion. In today's webinar on unlocking value in Africa's critical energy transition mineral sector, we will highlight opportunities for value addition and economic diversification, including a practical example of a diversification strategy as part of a recent project undertaken by UNCTAD. The webinar will also highlight another project currently being implemented for a rapid assessment of value addition and diversification opportunities within and around critical mineral value chains in 3 African countries. Furthermore, the webinar will address critical challenges that impede developing countries from benefiting from the critical energy transition minerals sector. Before I go on, I would like to remind panelists and online participants that this webinar is being recorded. It will be made available on the UNCTAD website and on YouTube the following day. Also, please note that after the panel discussion, we'll open the floor for questions. Please submit your questions via the Q&A chat box located at the bottom of your screen during the discussion, and we will address them in due course. So without further ado, I would like to invite the Chief of UNCTAD's Regional Office for Africa, Ms. Dan Sayinzoga, to give her opening remarks. Madam Chief, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rashid. Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to this webinar. As we all know, Africa is home to many of the world's most significant mineral reserves, including gold, diamond, coltan, among many other elements. Therefore, the mining sector is a cornerstone of Africa's economic development. The sector contributes significantly to GDP, export, government revenues generation in many African countries. Africa offers a significant opportunity in mining due to untapped reserves and increasing global demand for minerals. As per the World Bank, the demand of minerals will increase by 500% in 2050. And this growing demand will be mainly driven by digital technology and renewable energy sectors. For example, the UNCTAD Digital Economy Report 2024 shows that to produce 2 kilograms of computer, we need 800 kilograms of raw materials. And this confirms how the demand of minerals is really, really huge. In addition, the global energy landscape is undergoing a profound transformation driven by the urgent need to combat climate change and transition to cleaner, more sustainable energy sources. The growing demand of energy transition minerals driven by the rise of electric vehicles and renewable energy infrastructure position Africa as a key supplier of energy transition minerals. The continent is now attracting attention from global investors, companies, as well as policymakers. However, while the opportunities are immense, there comes with a set of challenges that need to be discussed and addressed by all the stakeholders. And those challenges include the lack of value addition. We all of us know that Africa is exporting mainly raw materials, regulatory and policy uncertainty, where mining regulations and tax policies are changing frequently and are very unpredictable in many African countries. And on top of that, mining regulations enforcement can be also a very serious issue. Among the challenges the continent is facing, we also have infrastructure deficit, policy and stability, and the governance issues, including corruption, skills gaps, among many other challenges. So today discussions will explore those challenges and opportunities in details, focusing on mining value chains. We will hear from experts and leaders who will share their insight on how Africa can benefit from its mining resources and benefit the whole population in general. As we dive into these critical topics, I encourage all of us to think about long-term impact of Africa mining sector, focusing on the impact on the economy, on the communities, as well as the impact on the environment. Thank you for being here today, and I wish you all a very fruitful deliberation. Thank you. Over to you, Rashid.
Thank you, Madam Chief. Now, I would like to invite the Director of UNCTAD's Division on International Trade and Commodities, Ms. Luz Maria de la Mora, to give the welcome remarks. Madam Director, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Rashid. Good morning, everyone. It's really a great pleasure and a great honor to be able to be in this seminar today. I want to start by thanking Ms. Diane Sayinsoga, Chief of UNCTAD's Regional Office for Africa, and her team for this excellent collaboration with UNCTAD. I also want to thank our esteemed panelists and attendees for joining us, and our colleagues here at UNCTAD for making this possible. So I really hope that this will be a very fruitful and productive webinar. Well, as we all know, and as Diane was already mentioning, the world is going towards a low carbon future, and critical energy transition minerals like cobalt, lithium, and rare earth elements will continue to play a key role in international discussions that have to deal with clean energy technologies, but also with digital technologies. These critical minerals are essential for the transition to renewable energy and the transition to the digital economy and a digital world. So Africa is endowed with abundant mineral resources. Africa is home to sizable reserves of the world's critical energy and digital transition minerals. For example, 48.1% of cobalt, 47.7% of manganese, 21.6% of natural graphite, 5.9% of copper, 5.6% of nickel, 1% of lithium, and 0.6% of iron ore globally. So these are just a few numbers to put perspective in where is Africa and Africa's contribution to this transition. So Africa stands at a pivotal juncture, offering immense opportunities for economic transformation to the benefit of African countries and African people. However, value-added activities within critical mineral value chains is still very concentrated, and it leaves many African countries that are endowed with this type of natural resources dependent on commodity exports, but commodity in a raw way, non-processed commodity exports. So as demand for this kind of critical energy transition minerals continues to rise, there is a real opportunity for resource-rich nations to unlock the full potential of these minerals. Developing countries then must focus on finding ways to move up the ladder in global value chains, adding value to their natural resources and diversifying their economies to also accomplish a more inclusive and sustainable development, which at the end of the day is what we are all looking for. So addressing challenges such as limited access to finance, to new technologies, the skills that this type of value addition requires, and infrastructure is also essential for achieving a larger participation and a deeper participation in this type of global value chains and advancing higher value production. So at UNCTAD, we have seen that local value addition is a form of diversifying diversifying economies, diversifying productive capacities that can have very far-reaching effects and very positive effects. For instance, let me just offer one example, and I know that we have a colleague, an esteemed colleague from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. So in his country, has increased the value of its cobalt exports tenfold through local processing. So this increase in value addition in the Democratic Republic of the Congo has enabled exports of $6 billion in cobalt exports, compared to just 167 million for unprocessed cobalt exports. So what we are seeing is that value addition in critical minerals does have a payoff effect for countries that undergo these kinds of transformations. However, we also need to know that efforts should go beyond local processing and refining. And let me also share with you that the International Energy Agency projects that critical minerals will reach a market value of $700 billion by 2040. Clean technologies could grow up to a market value of $3.3 trillion by 2035 in 10 years. So this means that the minerals market may represent less than 1/5 of the clean tech value chain. This underlines the need for African countries to pursue economic diversification strategies that not only focus on critical minerals, but also leverage their role in the broad green industrialization and in the search for renewable energies and zero carbon emission energies. So the webinar today aims to support developing countries, particularly in Africa, in assessing their strategic positioning within the critical transition minerals value chains. In this webinar, we will explore opportunities for value addition and economic diversification, and we will also address the key challenges that developing countries face, for example, financing, investment, infrastructure, or capacity building. So the goal today is to identify clear pathways for African countries to capture greater value from the global demand of these critical minerals, move up value chains, and foster long-term sustainable development. This webinar is part of UNCTAD's work on critical minerals. Let me offer you an example. Last year, UNCTAD, along with UNEP and the Climate Action Team of the Executive Office of the UN Secretary General, acted as the joint secretariat for the United Nations Secretary General panels on CETMs. Now, at UNCTAD, we continue to serve as the secretariat of the implementation of the recommendations with a particular focus on benefit sharing, value addition, and economic diversification and traceability, transparency, and accountability. We also have started the implementation of the rapid assessment of value addition and diversification capacity in Southern Africa to support Zambia, Namibia, and Madagascar in identifying diversification opportunities to effectively leverage critical minerals value chains. The project will also support the design of targeted policy instruments in areas, for example, of industrial development, trade policy, investment, infrastructure, innovation, technology transfer and development, and finance to support critical minerals and other priority sectors identified through the analysis and ensuring that targeted diversification efforts are supported by a coordinated and coherent policy framework. So I just want to conclude by thanking all of you for being here in this webinar. We hope that this will be useful for each one of the African countries to be able to pursue this value addition in critical minerals, and most importantly, to make sure that in this occasion, we can actually come up with better opportunities for African countries in the global economy. Thank you very much. I wish you a very successful webinar, a very productive one. And once again, thanks for being here and thanks for the organizers.
Thank you, Madam Director. Thank you so much for underscoring the importance of value addition and diversification as demand for these critical minerals continues to grow. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Clovis Frere, who is the head acting interim commodities branch, to introduce the landscape of critical energy transition minerals in Africa and opportunities for economic diversification. Clovis, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Rashid. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone. What I would like to present and introduce here is really a bigger view, a broad view of the situation of critical minerals in Africa, but more than that, to what are the ways that we can think about the opportunities for using and for unlocking this value in a way that we can have structural transformation and actual sustainable development in Africa. So let me start with this presentation, just highlighting what was already mentioned before, this richness on the continent of Africa in terms of critical energy transition, energy and digital transition minerals. As mentioned before, Africa is home of many of those minerals. It has many resources of that are used for the energy and digital transition. We know that there is an increasing demand for these transition minerals, and the demand is expected to really be bigger than the production and the supply of these minerals. So there is a big opportunity for the countries in Africa to capitalize on those resources. We also know that when we consider the critical energy transition minerals, energy and digital transition minerals, this is more than a mining issue. This is something that is related to the whole value chain. Here is an example from the cobalt to electric vehicles. So this long value chains that goes from one of the minerals that are used for electric vehicles all the way there. And we see there are many phases: extraction, processing, you have the battery materials, you have cell components, so these manufacturing parts, and then you have the end users, electric vehicles. And here we can build so many other long value chains like this, going from different minerals. You can go from lithium, graphite, and so on, copper, and all the way to different types of technologies that are used. Here we just use example electric vehicles. But when we see these long value chains, we see that there are some interesting characteristics. They are usually concentrated. Of course, there are a lot of concentration upstream in the value chain, but if you look closely, there is a concentration in other parts of the value chain as well. Another characteristic is that value increases as you go downstream in this value chain. You can have higher values of exports, a high unit price as you go down. We're also interesting that we see that volatility in price goes down as you go downstreams as well. Higher volatility is for upstream on the value chain. Another thing is that the further downstream you go in this value chain, fewer developing countries you find as big players in this value chain. Developing countries are usually on the upstream part of this value chain. And what is very concerning, it's a very important thing that UNCTAD, the UN Trade and Development, always emphasize and try to highlight, is that many countries in the world are still commodity dependent. They rely over 60% of their exports in commodities. And this is particularly true in Africa. This graph is showing in the colored countries, there are the countries that are dependent on different commodities, either agriculture, energy, or mining. And the commodity dependence, it's really a developmental issue. Countries become very vulnerable. Their growth and their GDP per capita basically trails the price of commodities. When commodities go up, the GDP go up, and commodities goes down. So it's very vulnerable to shocks from the outside. And you see, when you see the number of countries that are in a vulnerable situation, like small island developing states, landlocked developing countries, or least developing countries, the majority of these countries are commodity dependent. So how to avoid that the critical energy transition, energy digital transition minerals becomes a new source of commodity dependence? And that is really actually one of the motivations for the creation of the United Nations panel on critical energy transition minerals last year. When our Secretary General created that panel, one of the things that he mentioned is that we cannot repeat the mistakes of the past with a systematic exploitation of developing countries, reduce it to the production of basic raw materials. And this group of experts was created. It came up with a set of 7 principles that starts with human rights and then environmental aspects, justice and equity. Principle 4 on benefit sharing, value addition, and economic diversification. We had principle 5, investment, finance, trade, 6 on transparency, accountability, governance, and 7, multilateral and international cooperation. And we are very pleased to have here with us one of the panel members of this group, Mr. Maurice Miema, that will be also be one of will be with us in a minute in the panel. And this the work of the critical energy transition mineral is very important because it gives the guidance of how the direction on how we should move. And for us in UNCTAD, the principle 4, value addition, benefit sharing, and economic diversification is critical, because for us it's very important that this should be an opportunity for countries that not only dig minerals from the ground and send them to ships, not only from the pit to the port, but really use them for transformation and get out of commodity dependence. And the way to do that is through economic diversification. And when we go to countries, they know that. They know that they have to diversify. They don't value addition as a form of diversification, adding value to the minerals. But usually they don't know how to do it. So diversify, they know, but how to do that? And I will show that we need a strategic way to diversification. Let me first highlight that diversification is really very much associated with total GDP. What this graphic is showing is that it's showing in the vertical axis is the number of products a country exports, just counting the number of products, not even the value of the product, just the number. And when we do that and compare with total GDP of countries, we have a very strong association between these two. Actually, just counting the number of products that a country exports explains 71% of the variation of the total GDP of countries. This is very high association. It shows that countries that are more diversified, they are associated with a higher total GDP. What we know that diversification is critical, but it's not only any diversification. It's not only move to any good. We know that the diversification that has association with growth and development is the one that is pushing towards more complex goods, goods that are associated with more technology. Complexity is that. A more complex product is the one that uses more technology in its production. And not only within the plant of the firm, of the factory, is the technology throughout the economy that allows that product to be produced. So it includes infrastructure, ports, airports, roads, includes legislation, regulations. It includes human capital, everything related to know-how, behavioral actions, and so on. So all of that is together the technology required. What this graph shows us is that if we have a model and we consider in each country 3 variables only, the diversification, how many products the country exports, what is the average complexity of that production, and this labor force size, the size of the labor force that can use that technology. Only putting these 3 factors together, we can explain 91% of the variation of the total GDP between countries. It's very strong. It's really the countries that are more diversified and more complex, they have a higher total GDP. We also know that the diversification is path dependent. There is a way to go through the diversification. And we can represent that in a graph like this one. This is a graph called product space map. What it shows is each one of these circles is a different product, and when it's connected to another one, is because both are usually the likelihood of them to be exported together is very high. For example, if a country produces a computer, the likelihood to also export a cell phone is very high. And we know that when we build these graphs, we know that there are some sectors that are very well connected. These sectors in the middle of this graph here. These are machinery, auto industry, chemistry, electronics. So they are, once you produce that, it's very easy to diversify to other sectors. And there are products in the periphery of this graph. Usually these products are primary goods. So you have here diamonds. This big one here is oil. Once you produce that, you may be able to make a lot of money, but the opportunities to diversification are not big. So it's important to understand where countries are in this different product space map to try to identify the opportunities for diversification. And when we think about critical minerals, of course, we always think about this straightforward diversification through value addition downstream. So you go from mining, extraction, to beneficiation, processing metals, precursors of battery, for example, if you go to batteries, battery material, battery packs, and electric vehicles, and so on. Or you can think about this is like a forward diversification, but you can think about the backward linkage as well. Think about all the suppliers for the mining process, and that those could be a source of diversification, not only on products, but also on services required to that, like engineering and so on. But what we want to really highlight is that we have to think this in a broader sense. As we think about value addition and diversification, bringing together other value chains as well. So for example, if you may go to here after the beneficiation, you may have some components that can be used on the chemical value chain to produce fertilizers that can be used on the agro-food value chain and so on. So you dynamize and capitalize the opportunities to have many other opportunities within and beyond the value chain. So I would just like to finalize, I would just want to highlight one way that we can put all these concepts in practice. And we are bringing these principles to practice in this project that we have called Critical Energy Transition Minerals, Rapid Assessment of Value Addition and Diversification Capacity in Southern Africa. It will be a project that will focus initially in Madagascar, Namibia, and Zambia. We hope that after this project, we can extend it to other countries. And the idea is to identify the opportunities for value addition and broader diversification within the value chain of critical minerals, but beyond, in agriculture, manufacturing, in other areas, including services. And the idea is that after we identify these opportunities for diversification, we can think about what are the policy instruments that would allow them to exist, the diversification to happen. And I'll go a little bit quicker over these different steps that we have. This is the map of the implementation of the project as a whole. And the idea is that the first step is to understand the situation of the country, build these product space maps using trade data that we have in UNCTAD, very disaggregated data set, 49,000 types of products. And then we use data from the country, specific from the country, specific from the place where you have the urban area closer to the mine extraction and the mine extraction, to use that information to understand exactly what is produced in that place, not only in the mining sector, but in other economic activities around that the mining there. So identifying what is produced in that place, we can then think and look at this product space and see what are the potential new products that are not produced there yet, but could be produced with high probability, 80% or higher. And then we look at those and say, out of these products that could be produced with higher probability, which ones have a higher complexity, higher than average, that can bring the complexity to a higher level of complexity, and which one of them have higher demand in the global markets. So we look at the global markets, and we will look at the regional markets to also see what are the products that have higher export potential in the region as well. And when we do that, we have this list of potential new products, and then we would consult with experts of the industry and prioritize those sectors. I will go over this to explain a little bit how we go there. And once we prioritize these sectors, then we go and see, okay, what are the policy instruments that would allow those sectors to exist? So instead of going to the country and do a very long list of potential policies to fix, so you go to the country and do this needs assessment and say, oh, you have all those things to fix in infrastructure, all those things to fix in trade, in education, in finance. Instead of doing that, we go to the country and say, those are the opportunities for value addition diversification within the value chain of critical minerals and beyond. What are the policy instruments, very targeted, that will require to do that? And finally, we disseminate. So for the first phase, we go to the country, try to get the data, go disengagement with the stakeholders, and to understand exactly what is produced in that place, what is produced there to put in the product space. And then once we do that, we go with the long list of potential sectors for diversification, and we have a very detailed consultation with industry experts. And on that, we go deeper on each production, and we ask them, this product had with 80% probability to be produced here, but is not produced yet. What do you think that is the main issues? It's finance, is infrastructure, is regulation, what it is. Tell us what it is. Also, what are the inputs for the production and where these inputs come from? They come from this place, this country, the region, because if it comes from the place, it comes from the country, it's better because then you dynamize the local economy. And we ask the machinery, what are the machinery required? Where you get that machinery? From this place, from the country, from the region, and we always try to prioritize that. We ask what is the scale of production that will make economically viable and how many people you would employ. And they tell us, you may need 100 people to do that on this scale to produce 1,000 units per month that is economically viable. And then we prioritize the sectors that generate high employment. And we ask them, what is the share of men and women in production? 50-50, 40-60, 30-70. And then we prioritize the sectors that employ more women. What is the impact on the environment, the sustainability aspects, and so on. So we go very detailed and we prioritize the sectors that are aligned with the priority of the country. And then we discuss the target policy instruments in the different areas on how to make that happen. Maybe you need for certain production, you need chemical engineers. So the policy instrument is very clear. You may need to you select one university nearby and you put more resources there to train more chemical engineers. So you don't need to revamp the whole educational system, but we'll go there with a very target policy instrument. So we support this bottom-up approach to identify the opportunities for diversification, to try to answer that question, how to go about diversification, with then a concrete strategic diversification plan that is very targeted. Well, we'll be doing that in 3 countries, Zambia, Namibia, and Madagascar. It's a rapid assessment. We go and don't we spend years doing that. 4 months, 5 months, that is done. And we look forward to start this work in these countries. We're starting now in April. And we also look forward for further engagements to bring the results and share the results of this experience there with you all. I'll stop here. Thank you very much. Back to you, Rashid.
Thank you, Clovis. Thank you for the detailed presentation. Thank you for highlighting the UN Secretary General's panel principles on guidance on how we should move on developing the critical energy transition mineral sector. Also identifying, giving us a new approach to diversification, identifying areas using the product space, and then coming up with policies that would drive this diversification in different countries. We are already started to run out of time, so I'm not going to dwell too much on Clovis' presentation. I'm sure some questions will come in and we'll direct it directly to Clovis. But now I would like to introduce the panelists for our webinar today. We have 5 panelists. I'll briefly introduce them and then I'll start asking the question. Ms. Annabelle Maran, She's a research fellow at the Institute of Development Studies in the UK. We have Mr. Fred Kabanda, who's the manager, Extractors Division, African Natural Resources Management and Investment Center, African Development Bank. We have Mr. Maurice Miema, who's the director, Ministry of Mining, Democratic Republic of the Congo. Mr. Rolf Traeger, Chief Least Developed Countries Section, Division for Africa, Least Developed Countries and Special Programs at UNCTAD. And Mr. Oliver Baponga, who is an Economic Affairs Officer at the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. So, not wasting any more time, I would like to remind panelists that please limit your answers to only 5 minutes. If we don't do that, we'll run out of time, and we don't want to do that. I'm sure the time is very valuable. So let me ask the questions now. The first question will be to Ms. Annabelle Maran, who is the research fellow at the IDS. Annabelle, based on your research in countries like Chile, Peru, and Argentina, what are the key lessons for how local firms can successfully add value and integrate into mining value chains, particularly in regions where extractive sectors have historically operated as enclaves? Annabelle, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you so much. So hopefully what I'm going to say is very complementary to what Clovis said, because it's very much based on the experience of firms that manage to enter these value chains related to natural resources. This is based on the study of more than 100 cases of companies that managed to enter in South America, Argentina, Chile, Brazil, Peru. But also looking at dynamic issues, what happened after entry, because one challenge is to entry, but then another one is, of course, to survive and to expand. And if we are interested in diversification, we need to look at all of this, because many companies that manage to enter, then they face very hard challenges to stay as suppliers or to stay as adding value to these activities, because they operate in very competitive markets. So this is based on this, and also on a very recent study we did on ECLAC, for ECLAC, United Nations in Latin America, for the lithium value chain in Argentina and Chile. So first point to make is very difficult to enter as a supplier or adding value, because we are talking here about very competitive markets, very organized global markets, but it's possible to enter. But then, so we need to really think, diversify the places where we aim to enter. So not just to focus on adding value, but I see that a lot of the discussion is about adding value, but actually much more opportunities are on the side of suppliers, sophisticated, knowledge-intensive suppliers that create that. They can be of many, many kinds, and we can draw much more on the knowledge and capabilities of the countries when we are thinking about suppliers than when we are thinking about adding value. And also think about this dynamically. So it's not just that you need to enter in a very high segment of very high knowledge intensive, but you can evolve. One of the cases that we follow very closely in Argentina is, for example, cases of transport, that they started being done transporting personnel, employees from the companies in the north of the country, and then they become very specialized in transporting very sensitive material like chemicals and so on. So basically, this is a case in which they enter supplying a very simple service, but then they evolve into supplying a very sophisticated service. So this is the first point I want to make. The second, as I said at the beginning, is that companies face very different challenges when they, for entry, for staying, or for expanding. So for entry, one of the main problems they have is to get noticed, because companies, the large companies that extract the minerals, they normally come to the countries with their own suppliers, their own global suppliers. So for domestic firms trying to enter, it's very important that they get noticed, that the companies know them, and that, so policies should really aim to help companies to in this direction. And then there are other challenges, like, for example, technical issues and so on, that quality issues that need to be addressed. But then to survive, one main challenge that these companies face is contracts. Normally, these large companies don't operate with contracts, with good contracts. So these companies made a lot of investments they have some, then they cannot, many times without contracts, then they don't know what to do with this very specialized knowledge they develop to be a supplier or to add value to the resources. So, and then to expand, the problem that in general these companies face is that they are over adapted to the resources which are they're either supplying or they are adding value. So the issue of how to move from over adaptation to the local resources to regional or global markets is a big issue, and that's something that we saw as a big barrier. And then finally, I would like to say something about strategies of entry, because we noticed that the companies use 3 different types of strategies. One is that take advantage of the specificities of the resources. This is the advantage that they take more, because local resources are very different between countries, and global suppliers normally don't have solutions which are well adapted to the local resources. So there is a big opportunity there for domestic suppliers to supply, but also to add value to these very low resources which are very specific to the countries. And then another one, of course, is to use a new knowledge, also very specialized, but also local knowledge, which is relevant for these solutions. And I think I took my 5 minutes. I finished here, and then we can discuss more things in the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Annabelle. Thank you. It's refreshing to get your views and highlight the fact that the focus should also explore other areas, not only the focus on adding value, but there are other opportunities as well in the supply sector. You can start on a very small scale and then specialize and move on, climb up into much more specialized goods and services. So the next speaker that I'll invite now is Clovis. I have one question for you based on your presentation before I get on to the other speakers. So Clovis, you mentioned that UNCTAD promotes a bottom-up approach to strategic diversification, starting with identifying sectoral opportunities and then aligning policies to support them. From a macroeconomic standpoint, what enabling conditions need to be in place to ensure those targeted sectors can thrive? In particular, how can countries align their macroeconomic policy frameworks, such as exchange rate and interest rate policies, with their long-term diversification goals? Clovis, please.
Yes.
The floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks, Rashid. I'll be quick. Yes, to support diversification, we have been promoting this ground-up, bottom-up approach, but of course we need the right macroeconomic conditions in place as well. And these sectoral opportunities, they can only really thrive if there is broader policy environment to support them. So a key condition, macroeconomically speaking, is maintaining a real exchange rate that is both competitive and stable. When the exchange rate is overvalued, it really distorts all kind of price. Will be very difficult for companies to invest and to start new production and to diversify. And that's a big problem for commodity-dependent countries, that they tend to have an overvalued currency. Though this we can see incentives for investment, innovation, upgrading. So we need a competitive exchange rate, and also that encourage exports and strengthen local production. Stability is also very much important, so to give investors the confidence and to plan the longer term and take risks. Related to that, investment and confidence is another macroeconomic price that is very important, is interest rates, that they should be aligned with these development goals. Usually, if they are too high, they discourage productive investment. They tend to reward more these short-term financial investments, so instead of productive investments. So in a way, I think I'll summarize here, we should avoid policy frameworks that prioritize short-term, and we have to prioritize and promote macroeconomic that prioritize long-term structural transformation.
Thank you, Clovis. That was brief, straight to the point, and very welcome in the name of time. The bottom-up approach, you said, requires macroeconomic conditions that are right to support the to support diversification. I wouldn't go deeper into this. I'm sure the Q&A section will probably bring out some of these other macroeconomic conditions that you've highlighted, like exchange rate stability and interest rates as well. So I'll jump on to the next panelist, was Mr. Fred Kabanda, who is the manager for extractive divisions at the African Development Bank. Fred, given your leadership at the African Development Bank's extractive division and your long-standing experience in resource governance, what do you see as the most practical steps African countries can take to move beyond the export of raw critical materials, which has been the case for many years in many countries? What do you think African countries can take to move beyond the export of these raw commodities and establish competitive value-added industries, such as battery manufacturing or refining within the continent? Fred, please, if you can, 5 minutes to respond to this question.
Thank you very much, Rashidi, and I would like to appreciate the invitation. And in order to start to explain how we can move from raw material exports to competitive value addition, I would like to step back and say it is not going to be realistic to assume that one African country can be able to succeed in this sector on their own. Each must be able to evaluate their competitive advantage and work in a regional or continental perspective. This is going to be the first strategy in answering to the raw material export solution. And we have done some work and found that there are conditions that must be conducive for us to be able to add value in Africa. One is infrastructure. Infrastructure is a point that was emphasized in a study we did for DR Congo in the cost of producing a battery precursor with Bromberg and other partners. In this study, it is 3 times cheaper to add value in DR Congo compared to the US. However, there was emphasis on the need to improve on infrastructure like roads, railway, and aspects of electricity distribution in order to even make it cheaper. So infrastructure is key. Secondly, we are also lucky because Africa is not starting on zero. We can learn from experiences and observations from other countries. And even within Africa, we have seen that there is that trend of value addition. Countries are working together. DR Congo and Zambia are working closely, in cobalt, but there are countries working together in the manganese sector in Southern Africa, in nickel in Southern Africa, and these we have seen that even internationally, special economic zones is a principle that's coming up very closely. This is where we have clusters of industries which compose or work on value chains. Training is going to be key because in moving from the upstream to midstream and downstream, there is a change of skills. And so there will be a need to train and prepare people in order to answer and address these industries. Secondly, the local market is key because market size that meets the investment thresholds is going to be very critical. It is one thing to work for export of value-added commodities, but it is another to also look at what market do we have. And Africa is lucky in that we still have 600 million people without access to electricity. They need clean energy. And so this is a low-hanging fruit that needs to be used for value addition. And this is where the African Development Bank is running with the M300 projects, the desert power projects, and infrastructure corridors like the Lobito corridors, which will all work together in order to be able to address a market that can be interconnected within the development of regional power pools as an example. Before I close, I would like to emphasize 2 points. One, the need for environmental, social, and governance aspects, which include health and safety. We have learned from elsewhere that tailings management is an aspect that needs to be handled well. The emissions from power generation, what type of power do you use, is an aspect that's critical. In processing, many chemicals are used, and sometimes we see water contamination. This is going to be critical as well. Child labor is another. So these are aspects that, as we look at value addition, we must also be able to address. We must stimulate research and development because the technology doesn't exist, and we must be able to cooperate with those that have the technology, but also get involved in research and development, and therefore develop centers of excellence in research and development. The African Development Bank, together with the African Union, recently prepared the Africa Green Minerals Strategy, which the heads of states of Africa adopted last month. This is a direction that we see that we are going to be able to support our African countries. We are also very clear that governments must get involved. And how do they get involved? They need to have knowledge. This is how the African Development Bank is also doing a pre-feasibility study to establish readiness assessment for battery manufacturing, for regional energy, renewable energy value addition, and the electric value chains. These are some of the things that we need to work on. We can't work on this alone. We need to work together. This is why I would like to thank you for inviting us into these discussions and going forward. Thank you very much, Rashid.
Thank you so much, Fred, for your insights into what is needed for value addition, infrastructure, roads. We know electricity, it's been really a big issue on the African continent. A paper publication we had identified so many issues with electricity transmission and distribution on the continent, which actually hinders investment into the country in various sectors, not only in the mineral sector. But thank you so much for bringing this up on highlighting some of the essential things that are needed to drive value addition on the continent, not to mention the training, the skills that are required, and also importantly, the need for environmental and social governance in the sector while we are going about developing the sector. The next question I have is to Mr. Maurice Miema. Maurice, the Democratic Republic of Congo has made notable progress in increasing the value of cobalt through local processing. From your perspective, how can certification and evaluation frameworks be further leveraged to support broader economic diversification strategies, ensuring that mineral wealth drives the development of new industries and local supply chains? Maurice, please, you have 5 minutes to respond to this question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rashidi. I'd like to recall that most of the things that have been said earlier were very useful enough regarding the mineral sector. And as you know, the DRC is endowed with a variety of minerals. And the biggest issue that we start before we talk about the diversification is, first of all, the problem of insufficient geological knowledge. We're talking more about cobalt, but we do have graphite, we have lithium, we have manganese, but now, as of now, we only have 19% of knowledge of the country in terms of geological knowledge. So we still have a large, enough work to do to increase geological knowledge. And the government has put in place an agency which is in charge for, conducting this work. And hopefully that we are going to enlarge our, the range of minerals, because there are so many others that need to be, like lithium is there, but we are not mining lithium yet, but we are on the way of increasing the mining of lithium and graphite as well. The second thing I wanted to mention is that, if we don't have good knowledge, we have problem with negotiating contracts. And, companies come with means and they invest from the exploration all the way to the export. And as you can understand, the minerals, we are not really owning the minerals as such. We do have a share, but not a significant share as a country, because we need to increase, geological knowledge and certify our reserves and make, be in a position of, negotiating contract in a very fair manner, because we're talking about equity. And I would also, by the way, now we are more inclined in just tax revenues, royalties and etc. That cannot really improve. To enhance economic growth, we need to increase resources, revenues, and those revenues will come only, they talked about value addition. If we have, and they talked about increase of the demand, and if we really have a great amount of minerals coming in, I think we are going to meet the demand and we will have enough share in increasing value addition. You already said that we have made progress. We thought already before, and I think that Mr. Fred has talked about that, and even those who came with the earlier comments talked about the effort that we're doing on the ground. There is, following our legislation, we cannot export concentrate anymore. We have to export processed minerals. But the processing of minerals, we do have processing, but we still need to increase. We are doing already efforts in processing, but we need to increase and reach the refinery state. So, which means that we need infrastructure. They talked about infrastructure. We need technology. I think that Clovis talked about technology, the need for technology and skills as well. These are the things we need to, to increase, value addition in terms of processing and refineries and etc. Processing entities and refineries. And also, I just wanted to mention that, as you know, we have implemented a ban on cobalt. This is due to, price volatility. I think that Clovis talked about that. Market manipulation as such. And we did understand that because of, the mining of cobalt, there was market manipulation. And then we implemented a ban, which took place in February, and it is going for 4 months. And we're just going to check and see how we can stabilize the market locally, indeed, because we need to have at least stabilization of the market locally. And we also have a master plan now for value addition. That master plan, there is an agency that we put in place, which is the Battery Council. It's a government agency which has produced a master plan in addition to the MOU that we have with Zambia on precursors of battery. We have two, it is the first project, and we have another project now that we are putting in place, which is called Kamina Project, Kasao, and it is an integrated unit which is going to transform the pure metal into battery precursor, battery material. So which means that we are already working on that side. But the most important thing, it's not that we remain only in the mining side. We are thinking of moving from the resources we get from the mining industry and move these resources to agriculture. And this is already a plan also that we are having. But as you know, we are undergoing a war, which is based on these issues of critical minerals with the neighboring countries. On one side, we are pushing on regional cooperation, but on the other side, we're also having troubles with neighboring countries that are trying to loot our minerals and imposing war, aggressing us. And this is a very big challenge as well. No matter whatever we can do right now, but we need stability. And I think it's a very important thing that we need to mention, because without stability, there's no way we can make progress in all the programs that we are trying to implement. I can maybe stop by there, and then you will ask questions. If there are questions or whatever concerns, we can address them. Thank you.
Thank you, Maurice. It seems as if there's a theme that is running through the panelists, the emphasis on knowledge, which was mentioned also by Fred, that governments should have the knowledge. It's critical to have the knowledge to be able to actually negotiate good contracts. That increase of knowledge may come geologically from the minerals that they have, where they're found, the quantity of minerals, and the quality of minerals also. And also what's needed for value addition, the need for infrastructure, that seems to be running through as well through the panelists' contribution. Technology and skills are other areas that are needed for value addition. So my next question I'll throw to Ralph Traeger, my colleague at UNCTAD. The 2022 least developed countries report emphasized that for LDCs to benefit from the low carbon transition, they must develop productive capacities, address structural vulnerabilities, and avoid falling into new forms of dependence, particularly on raw material exports. In this context, how can LDCs harness the current momentum around critical minerals to develop productive capacities that support broader economic diversification beyond mining and into sectors like manufacturing, renewable energy technologies, or services? Ralph, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Rashid, and thank you for the invitation to participate in this critical webinar. So first of all, what the least developed country report puts forward is the need for LDCs, for least developed countries, to put in place industrial policies aiming exactly at the structural transformation of LDC economies. And here I would like to go beyond several of the macro issues that have already been mentioned, infrastructure, etc., but focusing on some meso level issues, particularly in terms of entrepreneurship policies for these countries. And of course, there are some problems and challenges which regularly pop up in any survey, any enterprise survey that is done in these countries, which is the need to improve financing mechanisms for enterprise development, the need to build technological capabilities for local companies. This comes up regularly, and again, it has been mentioned this morning in this workshop. But I think that in the case of LDCs, you have some further specificities, which is the specificity, the way in which the entrepreneurial sector is set up. And here, this refers particularly about the issue of missing middle in these countries and the very strong concentration of the entrepreneurial sector in micro and small enterprises, even beyond medium-sized enterprises. As we pointed out in our earlier LDC report of 2018, 58% of enterprises in LDCs, they have less than 20 employees. And so any type of industrial policy which is aiming to add value, to build linkages, to densify activities around the extractive sector has necessarily to take into account the importance of the small-sized companies and has to build specific policies to strengthen this sector and to strengthen their capacity to hook into value chains through backward linkages, forward linkages, and possibly also amongst themselves. So that's the first point. The second point which I'd like to make is the importance of strengthening the industrial policy-making capacities of least developed countries. So you have several initiatives which are being put in place, and it is important that there is coherent with others of policymaking, with national development plans, etc., and particularly that there is continuity in time, particularly going beyond changes in government, etc. And in this sense, UNCTAD is now starting to put in place a program of training and capacity building in terms of industrial policymaking to the benefit of LDCs. And finally, the third point which I'd like to make, and which is in a sense connected to the capacity for policymaking, is the importance of strengthening the negotiating capacity of LDC governments. And here, mention has been made of the importance of knowledge, which is certainly very important, but I think beyond this, or besides this rather, there's also another very important aspect, which is the capacity to make deals, the capacity to negotiate by national governments vis-à-vis all sorts of partners. So this includes the domestic private sector, but this also includes, and very critically, with foreign companies, with multinational companies, because it's in terms of the contracts that are negotiated, in terms of the stipulations, the clauses which are included in contracts that will determine the extent to which national governments can capture mining rents and therefore can raise resources to allocate not just in the mining sector itself, but exactly to other sectors which are connected. And here we go again on forward and backward linkage, is diversification, etc. And finally, another actor with which they need to be able to have a positive agenda and to negotiate having this positive agenda is, of course, foreign institutions, foreign governments, but also multilateral organizations, multilateral banks, etc. So I think my 5 minutes is up and I finish my remarks here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rolf. Thank you for shedding more insights on how LDCs should progress, especially with their entrepreneurial policies. And as a lot of these micro and small enterprises have just a small number of employees, and these policies need to take into account this aspect of the structure of these MSCs to be able to tap into, link up into value addition activities. And also the importance of the strength in negotiating, the capacity to negotiate, how these LDCs can also benefit from these value addition activities by being able to negotiate better with international, both private and international companies. My next question goes to Mr. Oliver Maponga. Oliver, please, can you please enlighten how African countries utilize the African Continental Free Trade Area to promote local processing and intra-African trade of critical energy transition minerals? Please, if you can provide some examples of successful initiatives, it could be very helpful for us and for the audience as well. Thank you. Is Oliver there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in this discussion, which I think is very, very important given the direction which really the critical energy transition minerals have taken us. And just to thank the other panelists about maybe bringing to the fore the key issues around diversification, which I think is at the center of even when you look at the work around the African Continental Free Trade Area and optimizing benefits by African countries. I think I want to focus on 3, 4 issues that I think can tell Africa's story better in terms of benefiting from the African Continental Free Trade Area, without belaboring the point about where we have come from and what really the issues are with respect to the African Continental Free Trade Area. I just want to mention that the first issue is around opening up markets, reducing tariff and non-tariff barriers. That's the first issue, which really enables us as African countries to then trade in a space that is much more relaxed, that is much more preference-based in terms of being African producers. So it gives opportunities for African critical energy transition minerals to be able to participate in an environment where the barriers are reduced. So that's the basic. When barriers are reduced, there are several issues also that come into play, which are also important for the challenge or issue of beneficiation and value addition that we've been talking about since the start of this conversation. I mean, an open market with limited restrictions means a flow of investment, right? And if we are looking at critical energy transition minerals, we are saying investment intensive, the lack of investment on the African continent, and with a relaxed environment, there is that flow of investment across national boundaries. So I think you could say elephants will attract more in terms of investment. That is where the resource is more pronounced, there will be more investment in that particular country. So that's one of the benefits of the relaxed environment, that there will be investment flow. Of course, under the FCFTA investment regulations, there's an investment harmonization, which allows the capital to then cross borders and contribute to development of the mineral resources. The second point I want to make is also relates to the emergence of regional value chains. I think it's a point that has also been mentioned by colleagues on this call, that because of the ease with which we can export and import and move material across national boundaries, it allows African countries to agglomerate and be able to work together in focusing on particular minerals based on the comparative advantage of each country. I think my brother from the DRC spoke about cobalt, their relationship with Zambia, of course, yeah, based on the cobalt resource. You could look at the same relationship as well with lithium, maybe with Zimbabwe, with Namibia, manganese with South Africa. I think there are those relationships that can emerge on the African continent where there is movement of throughput across the national boundaries, specifically taking advantage of the opportunities created by the African Continental Free Trade Area. What does it do then when issues like that emerge? I think it enhances the continent's competitiveness in terms of our exporting these value-added products. Furthermore, if we look at the issue of infrastructure, which also has been spoken about this morning, you look at Lobito Corridor. What sort of benefits does it bring to value addition and the export of further processed materials? So I think those are the benefits of the African Continental Free Trade Area in terms of opening up the market opportunities. Another issue also that I want to emphasize is around policy harmonization, the emergence of a harmonized environment across the national boundaries, an environment that will attract the flow of capital, that will also facilitate the flow of skills. And by the way, we've agreed this morning that value addition is skills intensive. So there is need to develop skills, and there is need to facilitate the movement of those skills across the national boundaries. So that countries that are well endowed in skills can also facilitate the skills being appropriated by those countries without the skills. That is also important. It then brings me to the issue of free movement of people. Free movement of people is a key component in terms of supporting the beneficiation and value addition agenda and pushing African countries towards stronger collaboration in the critical energy transition minerals. The final point I want to make is the stimulation of the development of domestic industries that replace imports in the mining sector. We are looking at the stimulation of development of manufacturing, mining goods, technologies can be stimulated because now it's an open environment, then the technology can come in, African countries can introduce mechanisms and strategies that facilitate stronger investment in the production of chemicals that are needed for the mining sector, equipment that is needed for the mining sector, and indeed in developing the skills within the mining sector. I'll end there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Oliver. Thank you for shedding more light on how African Continental Free Trade Agreement is opening up markets, reducing tariffs, and breaking down barriers that enable us to trade more between countries. You also mentioned the need for the emergence of regional value chains with some examples that you've already given, and the importance of policy harmonization to attract flow of capital and flow of skills. The next stage of our webinar will be focused more on what the online participants have asked. These are questions that they posed, which I'll give back to the panelists to be able to shed some more light. These questions are somewhat very general, and that will require responses from each panelist, but please, let's be very brief. More questions are actually coming in, so let's try to accommodate as many questions as possible in this webinar. The first question is to all the panelists. What are the views of the panel members on the need for regional or joint approach to industrial policy in Africa, linked to regional value chains, the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreements, industrialization agenda, and incorporating, of course, energy and mining sector strategies? This is a question that came online from one of the online participants. So I'll throw this question back to the panelists. Maybe we can start with Oliver, because this is more directed to the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. So if you want me to repeat the question, I can repeat the question just to make it clearer. I think you may be muted.
Yeah, just repeat the question. Sorry, Rashid. Please repeat the question.
That's okay. The question is, what are the views of panel members on the need for regional or joint approach to industrial policy in Africa, linked to regional value chains, the African AfCFTA's industrialization agenda, and incorporating, of course, energy and mining sector strategies?
I think we joint industrialization approach is actually a space that is already active on the African continent. If you look at it from the perspective of the different regional economic communities, for example, where we are sitting in Southern Africa with SADC, they have a regional industrialization framework and roadmap, which essentially guides the different member states in terms of their own national policy frameworks. The idea is create a harmonized industrial environment which facilitates the development of regional value chains, cross-border regional value chains in the various commodities, right? And they are pushing that sort of agenda. And as the Economic Commission for Africa, we have supported them in that endeavor. So really, that's a key to regional integration. You are creating a harmonized environment across member states. Of course, there will be variable geometry Different countries will focus on specific elements that they think they've got comparative advantage in, but the environment will be harmonized, allowing for the cross-border evolution of industry. So it's an important element of regional integration that we cannot run away from. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Oliver. If any of the other panelists have any contributions to this question was from Tafer Tesfaciu. And if you want me to repeat the question again, I'll repeat the question. But if you can contribute to this important question, that would be really helpful.
I think, well, Maurice, I want you to say something, yes. Well, I think what my colleague from Zambia has said is really true, because we really have, from the SADC and even the AU, we are coming from a conference from AU. The whole, the very big thing we're talking about is harmonized policies. We do have African countries, each with its policy, but we need to sit together and see who can bring what, because every country has got something to bring, right? We do have minerals, but maybe others have skills, and we need to sit together and see who is going to bring what, and then harmonize. And the most difficult is now how to create, this platform where people can learn from each other, because there is peer learning that comes in, where we have to learn from each other and say, for this, I think the best way is that the way to take, right? Because one thing is just to talk about these things on paper, but the most important is now how to implement them and start doing things so that people sit together, as we have done with Zambia. Zambia has done with many other countries as well. And, when we're talking about corridors, we do have this, idea of sitting together and putting things together. And I think it's the harmonization, policies, everybody bringing something and discussing on who is going to put what and who is going to get what, rather than trying to force, because this is transborder trade. And we will have, happy experience with Zambia, but we have also unhappy experience with other countries like Rwanda and the other one. So it means at a certain moment, you need to look at how we can take the middle way, because sometimes it is progressive, sometimes it is not at all. So, but the most important is to have a forum where we discuss these things. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maurice. I'm tempted to even drop in another questions if there are any lessons that can be learned from other regional value chains in other in other areas, but we don't have too much time. So I'll quickly go on to the other questions so that we can cover the questions that are posed by others. Please be brief with your answers to the question. We only have about 8 minutes left for the webinar to end. This next question is from Jose Mela. How can access to international trade finance be improved for African mining SMEs, considering their risk profiles and capacity constraints? This question, I think, will be directed to the African Development Bank. Please, just 1 minute response, because I've still got a few questions to ask. So 1-2 minutes will be very brief. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Rashidi. Definitely, there is a challenge on access to finance. And one of the things we are doing is breaking down the opportunities and finding out what are the entry points that our entrepreneurs can be able to go into. And this is why we do a lot of studies, pre-feasibility studies, and identify those opportunities. For instance, even when we are looking at value addition for electric value chains, we know that that requires a lot of money. And this is why we have gone out to look at the low-hanging fruits of the 2- and 3-wheelers, whose value was 3.6 billion in 2021, but that's growing. And in the new Africa Green Minerals Strategy that was just adopted last month by the heads of state, there is a creation of a fund. This fund will be supplied by the African Development Bank, but also the companies themselves that are involved in mining. And these are the areas that can be able to help the small, medium enterprises in order to get a share of this new business. So this is indeed an opportunity, and we need to look at it going forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fred. We're seriously running out of time, but there's serious questions also to be asked as well. So the next question is from Yunus Tachi Indam. ASM production is very important in LDCs and definitely plays a critical role in the global supply of some critical energy transition minerals. Where does ASM fit into diversification and value addition strategies in Africa? One of the panelists can take this question, but please be extremely brief. I think this may be even suited to Maurice, because this ASM and it's quite widespread in the DRC. If you can shed some light on this particular question, that would be helpful.
Well, thank you. I'll be very, very quick. ASM is very important in the DRC, and we have a dedicated agency which is in charge for ASM. We believe that ASM, first of all, is very important because it impacts directly on the communities. And number two is that, it's job creative, because all those people who are working the ASM are getting jobs from that. And how can it contribute? The production should be, we are organizing them. We talk about formalization. It means grouping them into cooperatives and making them able to access finance and try to be, empowered financially so that they can bring big projects and diversify their activities into other fields. And I think it's what we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maurice. It's also important to note the environmental aspects of these ASM. Some of the ASM producers, there should be good oversight on them so that their contribution is really meaningful. We can trace it to really good practice in the ASMs. The next question also from Jane Zhang. She is talking about skills and knowledge, and it's to all panelists. For those panelists who haven't yet answered any of the questions, maybe you can take this one on. All the panelists have mentioned the importance of skills, knowledge, and infrastructure in value addition. Can we elaborate on some challenges on developing knowledge and infrastructure on the continent? It's open to all panelists, but if anyone, Clovis, maybe you want to give some insights into it, Annabelle, Rolf, any of you?
I can start quick, but I would like to hear from Annabelle. One thing is that a lot of the skills for diversification, for things that you don't know, you don't have yet. So even to have the training centers and things, and even the demand of people wanting to spend time and doing the training, it's a chicken and egg thing. You do have to have policies, and you do have to create the whole ecosystem to have the demand for people also to get these skills. But I would like to hear from Annabelle what you think about it.
I will talk about knowledge. I think of course, it's very important, but it's also very important to take into account the huge investments in knowledge, if they are not already done, thinking about how they will articulate with the industry is a big issue, because we have the experience in Argentina, particularly in association with technologies of extraction, new technologies, very interesting developments going on in the scientific system with huge investments by the government that are really struggling to connect to the existing projects. So it's important to invest in knowledge and skills associated to these sectors, but it has to be done already thinking how this knowledge will articulate with existing projects, which normally are managed by multinationals that they don't use and they find very difficult to connect. They don't open experimentation spaces. They don't want to change their technologies, which are very well known. So this is something important to take into account.
Thank you so much, Annabelle. Rolf, would you like to add to this question, respond to this question as well?
Yes, thank you very much, Rashid. Just very briefly, I'd like to just to add to what has already been said, with which I of course agree, is the need to have a very pragmatic approach. I mean, so it's not an issue of revising the whole education and training policy of the country, but being very, very pragmatic about what is needed for one specific industry or one specific set of industries, etc. Another point that I like to make, again, is that the issue of skills and knowledge is important both on the side of companies, but also on the side of governments. And here I'd like to recall, yes, that formal education, etc., is important, but knowledge by doing is an important way of accumulating and developing skills. So yes, formal education, training institutions, etc., but just implementing policies, going for it, this is another very important way of accumulating experience, skills, and knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rolf. So this will bring me to an end of the Q&A. We don't have any more time. I want to thank you all for your very interesting questions that came from online participants. And I would like to extremely grateful to the panelists for participating in this webinar and for your contributions. I would like to invite the Chief of UNCTAD's Regional Office for Africa, Ms. Diane Sain-Soga, to give her closing remarks. Madam Chief, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Rashid, for successfully moderating our session. As we are concluding, I would like to thank Luz Maria de la Mora, our director, for really her leadership. I also want to thank Clovis and the whole team from the ITC for co-organizing this session. Clovis, from your presentation, we really saw the importance of value addition in critical minerals. And thank you so much for sharing the different projects UNCTAD is involved in order to promote the value addition in Africa. Our special gratitude goes to our panelists, Annabelle, Fred, Maurice, Rolf, and Oliver, for sharing your thoughts on these important topics, and as well as providing some recommendations. I believe that it was very useful to the whole participants. So allow me as well to thank the participants. We had more than 170 connected participants. That shows the importance of the webinar and the topic itself. And as I'm concluding, so let me try to summarize all the discussions in a few sentences. So which means if the continent invests in value addition, in infrastructure, in governance, as well as in human capital, so Africa can foster an environment that attracts responsive investment while ensuring that the local population benefit from the critical minerals sector. So if managed effectively, Africa's energy transition minerals could catalyze long-term growth, resilience, and prosperity for the continent, and contribute significantly to the global climate goals and the future of sustainable energy. So once again, let me thank you all for your time. This is a very interesting topic. We shall keep in touch. We will share the presentation. And if we are organizing another session like this one, we are looking forward to see you and having your insight as well. Thank you so much. Over to you, Rashid.
Thank you so much, Diane. Thank you, all the participants once again. And the session is closed for this webinar is closed. Thank you so very much for participating in this session.